Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of Coming Distractions brought to you by the Nerdpocalypse podcast. I'm your host, Jay. I'm solo this week. So I am going to sit down and review Gringo, which is the newly released film starring David Oyelowo, Charlize Theron, Joel Edgerton, Amanda Seyfried, Thandie Newton, and Sharlto Copley. So going into this movie, I was kind of shocked at the star power of this movie, considering how kind of underground this film was, not getting that much bit of buzz or anything like that. It kind of came out of nowhere. Then at the end of the film, I realized exactly how all these stars came together, and that's because it's directed by Nash Edgerton, who is Joel Edgerton's brother. So I assume it was a favor that Nash called in on his brother, and his brother was like, hey, I got some friends that are pretty famous. They'll do this little small movie, because Nash Edgerton has done a couple of short films in Australia, but he's mostly known for a stuntman in Hollywood, which is kind of interesting. So this is sort of his first feature debut. Yeah, stunts are probably your thing. So this is not a good movie. It might be, so let me give the premise before I go into anything else. So it stars David Oyelowo as Harold Soyinka, who is this kind of average business guy who works for a pharmaceutical company that makes sort of like legal cannabis drugs, right? And he's sent on this mission down to Mexico to sort of be a liaison, and he's been doing that for a number of months on and off. And then we come to find out that his company secretly had been working with a cartel down there, unbeknownst to him. And he's sort of thrown into this situation where he's kidnapped, and his bosses are, you know, they're in America and they don't really kind of care what happens to the guy, because he's just like this poor schlub who just gets taken advantage of because he's always the nice guy. He always plays by the rules. At the core of the film, it's a morality tale. So you like David Oyelowo because he's sort of the underdog, and that gets kind of reinforced a lot. Literally, people say, oh, I like your underdog story, that kind of thing. Really, the movie is, you know, it's touted as this sort of action comedy. What it really is just a super dark comedy, like an emphasis on the dark. It might be one of the meanest movies I've ever seen. Charlize Theron and Joel Edgerton's characters as his sort of boss, his de facto bosses, they are two of the meanest characters I've ever seen on screen. And I'm not taking like, oh, I'm so offended by this or anything like that. I don't care. They're not real. But just their dialogue towards him and other characters in the movie, especially Charlize Theron, are just mean. It is amazing how mean these characters truly are. And they just don't give a damn about anyone but themselves, and they just do things that are just brutal, and their honesty, whether it's really valid or not in certain situations, just comes out like there's just no filter. Like whatever they think comes right out of their mouth. So it's that is kind of jarring in a way. The movie ping pongs between these sort of like morality moments to extreme violence to some like pretty like decent laughs from time to time. Overall, I don't know that it's a movie that honestly, it's done by Amazon Studios. I'm not sure this movie needed to be released in theaters. This feels like a movie that would have been direct to Amazon or direct to Netflix and would have probably found an audience there, I think, a little bit better than to spend the insane amount of money it takes to put a movie in theaters. Look, some movies just don't deserve your money at a Cineplex. They just don't. This is one of them. If I have to give it a score, I'm going to go with a 1.5 out of 5. It's almost okay. It really didn't keep my interest a lot of the time. There's a lot of like weird pacing issues and just real slow dragging out sort of moments. And then that's peppered with these like hyper violent moments, and just like, oh, okay, that part was like kind of funny, and then like, wow, these people are really terrible human beings. So it does all of that. Sharlto Copley is in it. He's always entertaining for like a kind of a wackadoo character, and he kind of plays that here, a little bit more toned down, but still in his wheelhouse. David Oyelowo as sort of a comedic lead in a way. works. He kind of works in that regard. But again, I prefer him in things that are a little bit more meaty for him to kind of dig into. Charlize Theron is a horrible human being in this movie, but she plays it fine. Again, almost like too well. Like it's bizarre. It's really disturbing. And Joel Edgerton he's just fine. Like he's okay. I don't think there's any necessarily standout performances, and I certainly don't think this is something to rush out to see this weekend. But again, wait for it on Amazon. Check it out then if you want. If you really like super dark comedies, this is probably for you. But I wouldn't put it on my list of things you got to see. So that's it for my review for Gringo. Make sure you check out the podcast version of this. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can just find it under Coming Distractions. And if you're listening to this on the Coming Distractions podcast feed, wherever you get your podcast, you can also watch the videos for these on youtube.com/the Nerdpocalypse. And we will see you guys next time. You're watching the Nerdpocalypse YouTube channel. Make sure you click that button to subscribe and check out our weekly podcast where we talk about movie, TV, news, tech, and weird stories from around the internet.